Hello, our story is The Open Window by Saki. Hector Hugh Munro, widely known as Saki, was a British writer from the early 19th century. He was born on December the 18th, 1870, and later died on November the 14th, 1916, during the First World War. He used to write about his society and culture through comedy and parody, which is one of his trademarks. Mainly influenced by Oscar Wilde and Lewis Carroll, which also are English and British authors. He's he's considered one of the masters of the short story. Among his publications, we can find The Rise of the Russian Empire, The Toys of Peace, and of course, The Open Window. The Open Window, published in 1914 inside the collection of Beast and Super Beast, a collection of short stories, is a fictional short story. It is witty and concise, which also are some trademarks, which also are some of the trademarks of the author that make his writing special.
Well. Now, we will continue talking about that plot. As previously said, we are making a sort of literally commentary about The Open Window, a story written by Saki. The story is in fact very short, I may say, and it can be divided into three main acts. First, Mr. Nuttall is presented. Mr. Nuttall is said to be a middle-aged man which has some troubles when talking, related to talking and meeting people, interacting. His lack of social abilities. Mr. Nuttall, because of other recommendations of his medic, he will live in a countryside rural area. I will say it a village or town. In this village, this town, his sister used to live, and as his sister knows well his brother, in this case Mr. Nuttall, she makes introduction letters, presentation letters, because she knows he won't talk to anyone. That would consist in the main first act. The other things I might add are that as he arrives to the town, he meets Vera, and that's it. They just talk a bit. In the second act, Mr. Nuttall and Vera continue talking a bit. Mr. Nuttall seems to be shy at this moment, and Vera notices it. She now messes with Mr. Nuttall. She tells stories about ghosts that habited in that house, about tragedies. She tells the story about several men who were hunting one day and horribly they didn't return. Years pass about that story, and one of the wives of the hunters is said to be awaiting them with an open window. That window, even if there is cold or hot, will remain open until the day they come back. In that time, or at that time, Mr. Sappleton enters the room. Mr. Sappleton, it's like a sort of mother, or somehow. And she starts talking with Mr. Nuttall. Miss Sappleton, I think I said Mr. No, it's Miss. I correct myself. Miss Sappleton is talking with Mr. Nuttall, and they just talk. It is not an interesting talk, and they do not have the same interests. Mr. Nuttall perceives a masculine scent in the room, but I mean, Vera told that she is widow, so well, Mr. Sapleton is not Mr. Miss Sapleton talks with Mr. Nuttall, and Miss Sapleton again and again, it's like the third time that I say, starts talking about things related to the windows, like his husband will be here soon, and they usually enter through the window, to not make or to not dirty the carpet, the floor, by the way. At that time, Mr. Nuttall feels like, oh boy, I'm getting scared, and tries to change the topic of conversation, remembering that this is the second act. He tries gently and in an educated way to change the topic, like, hey, I don't know, what about the cauliflower? I don't know. And Miss Appleton is like, yes. Now, continue with what I was saying. Those kind of things make Mr. Nuttall lose what he had as prudence. Mr. Nuttall then starts talking about personal things, and it's kind of, wait, those are not things that you are supposed to say in a first meeting. Well, they just talk about more like talking. It's like, I am obligated to listen you, so please end quickly. Well, that would be the most of the second act, I might say. Now, starting with the third act, Mr. Nuttall feels scared, really scared, and it's not helping that two manly figures and a dog entered through the window. When those figures entered, Mr. Nuttall stands and runs through the door. He escapes. He successfully escapes. And, well, Mr. and Miss Appleton were like, well, who was him? Said Mr. Appleton. Miss Appleton said, oh, well, he is Mr. Nuttall. He's a strange guy, but I don't know why he ran away. Then Vera says, oh, it's because a tragedy happened to him. And what's about? I suppose they asked. I do not know. Everything is improvised. I mean, well, continue with the topic. Miss Vera said, like, oh, a tragedy occurred to him related to dogs, and maybe when he saw the dog, he got scared and ran away. He told me before Miss Appleton was here that once upon a time he was wandering through a cemetery, and a bunch of dogs started to chase him. And running, he just found a tomb to hide. All the night the dogs were trying to bite him and barking through the tomb, and that's why he developed a deep trauma. And they were like, interesting. Little liar there you have, Vera. That might be everything of the third act, and as the third act is the last one of the plot, this would be the end of the plot section. Thanks for listening, mister. And yeah, that's it.
There are three characters who stand out the most in the story. They are Fredman Nuttall, Vera Stapleton, and Mr. Stapleton. Fredman Nuttall, the protagonist of the story, is a young gentleman who is very anxious and shy. On his vacation, and in an attempt to find a more calm life, he decides to visit the countryside. His sister has made introduction letters for him, so he won't have trouble socializing with people. He also shows to be very naive. Then we have Vera Stapleton. She is a 15-year-old girl who is described by Mr. Nuttall himself as a very self-possessed person. For her age, she is very clever and imaginative. At last but not least, We have Mr. Stapleton. She is apparently Vera's mother, and Vera describes her as a sorrowful widow who has severe mental health issues. She always leaves the window open.
Hey guys, I'm gonna be presenting the themes and the theses for Saki's The Open Window. And well, just as a quick rundown, the themes are basically just what the story talks about, right? Many of the popular themes are stuff like love or vengeance or death. They're mostly the stuff that we as people are really interested in. And theses are very closely connected to themes because theses are basically just what the author is trying to say about said theme, right? Like, for example, if we have a story about revenge, and at the end, the main character finds out that revenge is unfulfilling and he doesn't like it and he doesn't feel happy. By the end, when he completes his vengeance, then we can say the theme is vengeance, and the thesis would be, in that case, for example, vengeance is unfulfilling. Okay, so moving on to our actual story at hand, The Open Window. Personally, I think the main theme of the whole story is just fun, and more specifically, just how we can have fun when telling stories, right? Because the whole story of The Open Window revolves around that, which is it sets up this tension filled narrative throughout the whole story, with the niece telling Mr. Nuttall about the dead people and the ghosts and all that, the open window, of course. And it turns out it was all just for fun. And I think this clearly tells us that the author was just trying to say that sometimes we can tell stories just to have fun. They don't need to have like a deeper motive or meaning. We can just have fun with them. And another theme that really stands out and springs to mind is opportunities. This is a bit less explicit as fun, but it's there, especially when we take the meaning, well, the symbolical meaning of a window. It's more like an opportunity. There's the saying of when a door closes, a window opens, and of course, it's also when the niece Vera saw the open window, she saw an opportunity to just tell a story and have fun and play a prank on this guy. And of course, the thesis here in terms of opportunities as a theme, I think it would be that we can find opportunities everywhere and we can make fun out of them, right? And the last important theme of the story is truth, especially the veracity of statements, right? Because the whole story is built around Mr. Nuttall just thinking that the story that Vera is telling him is true, even though there's his instincts are telling him like, oh no, there's definitely men living here, right? Because of just how the room is arranged and all that, but he decides to ignore it, and he thinks the story Vera told him is true for no reason, just because she told him the story. And since he ends up being played because he thought it was true, I think the author is clearly trying to tell us that we shouldn't believe everything is true just because they tell us it is. We need to constantly keep doubting what people tell us and find out if it's really true through our own experiences and thoughts and all of that. So yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm here to talk to you about tone, style, and symbols found in the story. First off, we begin with the three main identified tones. The first one being a mysterious tone, which is no surprise considering that the author purposely avoiding giving too many details on both the characters and the context they develop in. But the peak, mysterious, and uneasiness arrives when we wonder, are Vera's stories truth? Are they a lie? Where did they come from? What's going on? Because after all, Vera is just a mysterious little girl telling us mysterious little stories. Moving on the list, we have a worrying tone. And although this tone is mostly perceived by the reader, we consider it to be very important. What do I mean by this? Well, the reader is worried about Mr. Noel's development in his new home, about his reaction to the mentally challenging stimuli such as scary stories, and we're worried about the veracity of the story. Because what if Mrs. Appleton was actually waiting for three ghosts to go through her window into her house? Last but not least, we have a humorous tone. Although a bit ironic considering the last two tones, we considered it to have a big humorous tone because when looking at the big picture, you can realize this is all a joke. And although Vera's stories do tend to be a bit creepy, unnerving, and scary, this is a matter to be laughed off, and hopefully all characters will be able to do just that in the near future. Now moving on to Saki's writing style. Saki's writing style actually benefits the development of these previously mentioned tones. It's proven to be very simple, clever, and neat. How did he achieve this? Well, the lack of detail and the lack of fancy literary resources that bombard the reader with lots of mental stimuli. This also leads to a bit of a cartoonish, fun entertainment style, but it also opens a pathway for mystery and uncertainty. Both of these things are actually what made Saki a brilliant author of this story. Now we have the symbols. The symbols are actually a bit well hidden in this story. The first one is Vera's name. Vera can be related to the word veracity, and not only that, but Vera is actually the Latin root for truth, which is very ironic considering that Vera has done everything but tell us the truth throughout the story. Next on the list we have Mr. Nuttall's name. Mr. Nuttall names can be reduced to nuts, which can be related to an English idiom of being nuts or going nuts. That actually means being crazy or being very wackadoodle. Next on the list we have the open window. The open window, the name of the story and a very important element of Vera's first line. The open window can be related in literature to an opportunity that needs to be seized. And our main character Vera did just that by taking the opportunity to lie to Mr. Nuttall and have a bit of fun with it. But also in the ending it mentions a secret romance. So maybe she could have seen an opportunity there too. So that's it. Those are the three main tones, the three main symbols, and Saki's writing style.
Hello again, mister. Well, at this moment I will talk about the relation of the story with the topics that we saw in the class for the English guide. Well, first of all, it's identities. Why? Because Mr. Nuttall has a well-developed identity. He knows that he does not want to relate with people. Well, I think that's kind of funny. And yeah, it's not related because it's funny or he does not want to talk about. This means like, or well, I relate to this like it is something you will not or should not approach. You must constantly develop connections with people, interact with people. Do not be at all shy or shy at all, which fits better, I don't know. And yeah, you must interact with people in order to be like happy, active, and a functional society member. Also, the things that you like are the ones who best fit in yourself. So just try to be more active and socialize, and do not be much like Mr. Nuttall. Well, the another topic that I can relate is experiences. Well, why is this? Because Mr. Nuttall experienced some things that are not very usual, I would say, and it was not a very good experience in the end. Well, why do I relate with this? because everything in the story is an experience by itself. And Mr. Nuttall did not interact with people, so he interacts by force, but in the end he interacts, and well, he just make it work out somehow, and poorly, yet somehow it worked. Yeah, basically, experiencing new things are vital for the human development. So don't you get stuck in just what you feel safe. Go out, experience new things, learn, and never stop learning. In fact, those things make you feel yourself as a human, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose those are the topics that are related to the open window story. So yeah, see you in the conclusion.
So, in conclusion, The Open Window is a very short and an easy to understand story. It has a really nice and simple vocabulary that helps you to set the mood without thinking of it too much. It also keeps you interested in the events that are happening, which makes it a success since the author's main goal was to entertain the reader. I think that this story impacts too much to someone who hasn't heard of it before because it has that surprise effect that you are not expecting, and I think that that is a really nice touch that most of the stories should have.
Concluding with what I talk about, well, it's an easy to read story that I think that it's well developed through the acts. The acts differentiate from each other pretty good. Yet I think that the second act was pretty large, and I won't say tedious. It was indeed, in fact, very easy to follow. It's a very short story, so it's like, wow, what a bunch of surprises, don't you think so? Yeah, I think it's something good that the story is short because it adds like this emotional punch, and the things go on like pretty quickly yet easy to flow with them. It's a very good story at my point of view and at my partner's point of view, so I would recommend it.
In conclusion, I think The Open Window is a really good story, because the way it is written makes it able to be read at one sitting, that along that it is only 2 pages long. The style of the author makes the reader to be at the edge of their seats at every moment, because you never know what's going to happen. The plot twist at the end makes it a really good story and leaves you wanting more.
So, as for the conclusion of the themes of the story and the theses, the story is about some very simple but very important themes like fun or opportunities, stuff that maybe we've seen in other media before. But for the short amount of time the story has to develop them, they are very well done, very well developed, and they're very well represented in terms of all the symbols and all the meaning the story has behind it.
So I would like to tell you my conclusion after evaluating the aspects me and my classmates just exposed. I would love to point out the duality in the story and how greatly Saki managed to pull it off. Beginning story with an unnerving, creepy theme and then ending it on a fun note is such an achievement as a writer. It shows creativity, it shows spontaneity, it shows the importance of plot twist, and most importantly, it shows that some stories were just made to be fun. I also love the open ending because the reader can rest assured that Mr. Nuttall, Mrs. Appleton, and Vera talked it out, and poor Mr. Nuttall is not left to believe that Mrs. Appleton is waiting for 3 ghosts to go through her window. I think this story is a perfect example of how fun a plot twist can make a story.